Hi, I'm Steve from Slick Cyber Systems. I'm here with Chris and Jim, and we're here to talk about disasters and recovery.
Disaster recovery planning, good stuff. And folks, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say a little disaster in the background happening. Nature's doing its best to drown us out.
It is.
Storm.
So yeah, you may hear rain periodically on the metal roof. Sorry, it's our gazebo. This is where we tend to hang out after work and have our meetings. And so this is where we're shooting our video content. So we don't have the bloody room inside to do it. So it is what it is. Anywho, we're talking about disaster recovery planning, so let's get into it. So the whole point of a disaster recovery plan, it's the ability for an organization to restore access and functionality, right, to the business, not just the IT infrastructure. Typically business continuity would be the entire business, but a major portion of that is disaster recovery, which is the IT portion. So we're obviously going to be talking about that primarily.
Yeah.
But there are other things, it could be a natural disaster, the rain, some
fire.
major, it could be fire, it could be an earthquake, cyber attack. It really could be a whole host of problems that this world, tends to bring us on occasion. But yeah, if you implement the right plans and the right tech, to make it happen, it should be less disruptive to your business. And certainly, if you don't plan at all, well, then you're planning to fail. You're planning to probably shut down and go out of business. So you need to have something here.
What was that stat that we saw recently about companies that didn't have a disaster recovery plan or had a major event closed?
Oh, it was like within 9 months or something like that. And don't quote the number, but yeah, it was some staggering. Fact, it was like less than a year. They had closed their doors, even if they had substantial financial,
resources
and push on the back end. It was no more than a year and a half, and they were done. They were just out. How do you recover from something like that? So, all right, well, let's talk about, the 5 top elements, if you will, pieces to an effective disaster recovery plan, as opposed to an ineffective disaster recovery plan. You need a team.
Yep.
You need a team. That team needs to consist of obviously specialists from IT, mm-hmm. right? So people that really have a say and a piece to do with what they do. Obviously, the CIO, if you have one, or if you don't have anybody on staff, your MSP. It's all those people. The CEO needs to be involved, or ownership of the company. They need to be involved because they're obviously the ones filling out. And there are other employees, vendors, and potentially even customers that you should have involved in that. Customers kind of rare, but it's possible. It is possible.
So should you probably have like a third-party crisis manager or something?
Well, I think the crisis management team, which we're going to talk about in the latter part of the video, I think that's a huge portion of this. But again, we'll dive into that a little bit deeper later. But yeah, it absolutely should have other people involved, for that. So outside of the team, risk evaluation, right? What are your potential hazards, your potential risks for the organization, that will stress your resources, stress your equipment, stress your building, which you could say is a resource, but I meant resources more like people. Mm-hmm. Remember when COVID, hit, that was a people event, primarily. And so in the event of a cyber attack, for example, what data protection measures should you put in place to thwart that, or help mitigate, the loss, the risk of loss. Thirdly, asset identification. What are the critical systems to run the business? I'm not talking about ancillary systems, the critical systems. What do you absolutely need to just run the business? It may not be I almost said Dragon Naturally Speaking, but whatever dictation software you're using, that is not critical to the business. What's critical to business is your financials, your ERP if you have ERP, or your EHR if you're medical, and how quickly can they be, restored? Because that's the core. They're the core chunk of the business. Is what runs the software that really runs the business, right?
So your team should literally put a list together and have input from every member of the team to say, well, maybe you do this or you do that, but you're not thinking about some other piece that you don't work with.
That is the point of the team.
Yeah.
I mean, to determine those factors, like what are my critical assets? I mean, let's look at this even like from a business continuity standpoint. Pen and paper. Mm-hmm. I mean, everybody needs paper. You need paper for the printer or printers that are there, right? But you need paper to write on too, because everybody at some point in time is going to write something down on a piece of paper. So, I mean, it's those crazy little things that you don't think about. The forms that your company may rely on. Maybe it's part of the ERP system, or EHR system, where it's a pre-printed form and it just fills out the stuff in between. I mean, that's now a critical asset. It's bizarre as that seems, but
well, if it's fundamentally the operation of what you're doing. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Think of it as a fire drill. So you can't be in the building looking for documentation when it should be readily available for you to take out
or access,
follow the procedure,
or access from outside.
Because you're not going to have access to your computers.
Exactly. So yeah, or access from outside. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, obviously different disaster scenarios have, different, like a true disaster, an earthquake, get the hell out of the building now, or fire, as opposed to the COVID thing, which you had very little time, but you had some time, a week or so to kind of strategize and figure out where you're putting stuff. So there's at least time to breathe. So yeah, there's immediate and I'll call it non-immediate, but all important. And you're absolutely right. That should be accessible from external, because if you can't get to that computer that it happens to be on, well, you better be able to get to it somewhere else outside the building.
I would even say, like how you said with COVID, that depending where you are in the world, I mean, there are different things where there, like if you disasters, there's very low level, like in the Northeast, we deal with like snowstorms.
Yeah.
You have like a blizzard, and it might keep people from coming into the office for 1 to 3 days.
Especially access to passwords, especially admin passwords. You should have those.
What if somebody's critically ill?
Yeah.
They the heart attack or whatever, and they're out of pocket for weeks, or a month plus. I mean, you better understand, if they're critical, assuming they're critical. Everybody's critical. Don't get me wrong, but I mean critical to the business operation.
It's the only person that knows the password.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. So yeah, that needs to be documented and shared.
It doesn't have to be a disaster of the physical building. It could be a disaster. It could be a loss of a key person within your facility that had the management codes and all that. Making sure you have those documented. So.
Yep, and available both internally and externally. And which you made very clear before, which is a huge point. Let's move on to point 4 here. Backups. I mean, geez, we preached backups and did a whole video on that just a little bit ago. I mean, geez, you better make sure that you've got good, solid backups that are stored off-site, not just internal.
Yeah.
So without getting into the whole backup thing again, but it's how quickly, at the end of the day, how quick can you bring a system back up, right? So the type of, depending on the criticality, the type of backup procedure that you're using, and then being able to restore that to make it functional. I mean, that all depends on the criticality. How long can you the business afford to be down? Before the threshold of pain kicks in, and it's like, okay, we're not paying people this week. That's a problem.
No, that's where your financial budgeting needs to come in and say, hey, you want this level of
and that's part of the DR team, right? To go through all those steps and procedures to make sure that your company is positioned properly in the event of a disaster. And of course, last but not least, in that little section that we talked about is testing. You got to test it, because you may have to optimize it.
Yep.
It may not be perfect, and you go, oh man, that took longer than I thought it was going to take, or you know what, I was missing this and this.
I would find it hard to believe if you didn't test that you would not identify that you missed a lot of things.
You can get lucky.
Yeah.
Do you want to get lucky for your business? I don't want to be lucky. I want to be. Yeah. I want to know.
Tested.
Yeah. It's so it's just an important thing. So. Those pieces I think are just super valuable to at least understand from a company standpoint of what is the threshold of pain that my business can be down, and where do we go from here, right? How do we bring the company back, whether it's on-prem where you were, or is it somewhere else because the building may be gone, a hurricane or a tornado or fire. I mean, and you still have to function. I mean, you still have bills to pay, you have money to make, collect money and employees that are there. So you need to understand your threshold of pain. Guys, I think that, let's call this a part 1. We're going to do a part 2 and a part 3 just because we don't want to make this video like 80 minutes long. We just want to crank, and get pieces of this. So, end of part 1. We're going to talk about how to build a disaster recovery team next, and that'll be on the next video. So stay tuned for that. Again, Steve, Chris, Jim, Slick Cyber Systems, 570-215-8888, slickcybersystems.com. There's, again, chat, all kinds of stuff. We've mentioned that a million times. We'll mention it again. So you definitely can reach us. Give us a call. We'll talk to you about this stuff. We know it. We do it all the time. It's fun to do. It may be monotonous, but it is fun to do. It's a good eye-opening to your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll talk to you in the next video. Take care. If you find this content helpful, please like the video, subscribe, and share with your friends and your colleagues. Thank you.